Stay back, boy. This calls for divine intervention. I kick ass for the Lord.
The king replied, "Truly I tell you, whatever you do for the one that are least of my brothers and sisters of mine, you do for me." Matthew 25:40. That's a damning non-answer. Governor Tim Walz. Welcome to Heresy and Hearsay, a podcast to reclaim faith in the context of political discussion. My name is Reverend Barney, and you can follow me on most social medias at SethRothII. Heresy and Hearsay has a Patreon site that you can find on patreon.com/Heresy and Hearsay, where you can find our past shows and ways to help us. Just $2 a month goes a long way to make this humble show. And unfortunately this week I'm going solo, but you can follow September by going to her website, which is Ninof12.com, which is NINEOF12.com. That's where you can find all her other podcast work and other work there. You can follow this show on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and any podcast catcher. Just look for Heresy and Hearsay. Please like, share, follow, subscribe to us. Also give us a review. That helps us find others. You can also find our first volume of podcasts on YouTube and Patreon. So I do want to apologize for the delay of this. I've been dealing with some illnesses and stuff like that, so I do apologize that this is almost 3 days late. I do apologize for that. So but this episode we're going to be talking about the VP debate and everything else. So before we get into the VP debate, Brother Bowie, can you lead us in a word of prayer?
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
All right, let's get into the debate and everything else. The first question I absolutely hated, which was, would we be okay with Israel do a preemptive strike against Iran, and would you support that? It's like, that's not a question that needs to be asked to the VPs especially, but more importantly, there's a sovereignty with Israel and everything else, and they have their own rights to do things. Would we support them? How would we support them? I mean, would we say, yeah, okay, go ahead, or are they asking if we would provide them with materials for it? I hated the question. It was a very the Israel, Palestine, Gaza, all of that is so fraught with so much history and so much problems, and there is a humanitarian crisis going on in Gaza right now, and there is just signs of genocidal actions by Israel towards the individuals of Gaza and the West Bank, that it becomes a point where this question asked is trying to, I feel, bait people into picking a side on this when it is so fraught because of so many problems with our history with Israel and everything else. You have to understand that a large contingency, especially of the right wing or evangelical Christians, is that they feel that Israel has to stand and has to be there because that's the only way that Jesus will come back and and kill all the Jews. That's in the doctrine in some places. I, as a theologian, tend not to believe in that. I also, I have serious problems with all of that as far as a theological nature when you're taking Revelations and taking it out of the context of the time period when it wasn't even talking about this kind of situation. It was talking about Nero and stuff like that. That's one of the reasons why I did a Catholic study, because they're less focused on the rapture and on Revelations. Evangelical Christians and Protestant Christians in America, I can't say what it's like in Europe or whatever, but in America is so fixated on the end times and on Revelations that it becomes fraught with issues. And Israel and their diplomacy or lack thereof, how they deal with the Palestinians and everything else, because Palestinians, before it, quick history that I know is that before Israel was created, a lot of those states like Iran, Iraq, stuff like that wasn't carved out until the First and Second World War, and it was done by the West, especially the British. So when Israel was carved out and everything, it was not a country per se. It was just a group of Palestinians, people who lived there, just lived there. And then it's like, oop, now it's Israel, and here's where all the Jews are going to live. Everything else, because of the Holocaust, and and it went bad from that point. As far as that's concerned, and it's not been easy for Israel. I do think Israel deserves to stand on its own. However, I do feel that the other countries deserve their own autonomy as well. I do think that Palestine the Palestinian people should have their own country, not a two-state solution, but their own country. Because the problem with Israel, the other problem is if you're not an ethnic Jew, then you have less rights and less rights than if you were an ethnic Jew. Someone made a very good comparison. It's basically Jim Crow laws, but for Palestinians. So that is extremely problematic. So I feel that that first question was just fraught with problems and everything else. Now, as far as the debate went on and they started asking other questions and everything else, one of the things that I did notice is that at first Tim Walz was a little uncomfortable, which is, I think, endearing in some respects. Lawrence O'Donnell talked about how debates really don't show you what a president can do other than temperament. And to understand where your weaknesses are and where your strengths are is extremely important. I feel that having that discussion is important as far as that's concerned. But when it comes to answering questions about what you would do in this policy or that policy or whatever, presidents don't do this stuff in a vacuum. They are the final arbiter, but they have let's talk about that first question. They have people who are diplomats in the area. They have diplomats that are of diplomats for Israel, diplomats for Iran, diplomats for Iraq, diplomats for Lebanon and for Jordan, and know the area, know the history. These are, and this is what they want to get rid of, is this kind of knowledge and understanding with the Project 2025, is they want to get rid of these career, they call them bureaucrats, but career, diplomats, career, whatever, because they have this expert knowledge of these regions and of these people and how they interact with each other and everything else. So when making a decision, they come in. You have the military come in, and it's like, if they start this, it's what would the ramifications be worldwide if Israel was to do a preemptive strike? Because you have to understand that the Pentagon just doesn't sit there and they don't just hoard a bunch of military goods and stuff like that. They also, the big part of several of their branches is that they run basically war games, with computers and stuff, and to see what all the contingencies were what happens if this happens? How would this set off? And then you also have the diplomatic corps who would be like, well, if Israel was to do a preemptive strike against Iran, though Iran is not well liked in the region and with certain people, it would set off a firestorm, or would it not? They would know. I don't know. I'm just saying they would be able to say, well, it would set off a firestorm, or, well, it wouldn't set off a firestorm per se, but it would X, Y, and Z. So, but presidents don't have those answers immediately in their heads. No one, no matter how smart they are as a human being, has that in their heads. That's why they have all of these other individuals who are very versed and experts in their field. So debates don't give you those kind of questions, don't answer those kind of answers for you as far as that's concerned. When it comes to because they don't have those answers, they can't have those answers, because they are just one person. A president is not a monolith. A president is not a supercomputer who knows everything. That's why you have a cabinet. So I think that is problematic. But with Tim Walz, he felt very uncomfortable at first, and he started to get more comfortable with how it was set up and everything, no matter how much prep you're doing and everything. Because I've done debates. As you can tell, I like to talk. So I've done debates. I've never been part of the debate course per se. My school's never offered a debate club. I would have joined instantaneously, but I've done debates in the past, in college and stuff like that, when I do the public speaking courses and things like that. I also, I've watched movies about debates and everything else and everything, I enjoy a good debate with someone. I've over the years learned not to be angry and not let my emotions take the best of me, but to be able to speak the facts and stuff like that. So I understand but every time you stand up on stage, and I've stood up on stage and done public speaking quite often, when I do this podcast, I still get butterflies in my stomach. So I understand, pardon me. So I understand about the concerns, and about being nervous when you're doing this kind of thing, that it could be a little nervous. So I feel that's extremely important. Now, there were, of course, questions that were asked, and I noticed one of the things Tim Walz really did hunker down, give some wonky, in a good way. When I say wonk or wonky, I mean it in the best way possible, because I think it's important, but gave very good policy talking points, or talking about policy, what we're going to do as far as gas prices, or what we're going to do as far as small businesses, and giving all this kind of stuff. And the thing is, I think a couple of days before the debate, the Harris-Walz campaign put out a 88-page economic paper of exactly what their plans are, and how to handle the plans and everything else. So I felt that worked out really well for Walz as far as that's concerned. J.D. Vance was very slick, very smooth as far as his answers. He didn't answer a single question, but he was very slick and very smooth about it. One of the things, I'll be posting 3 different sources for fact checking. I would definitely look into the Al Jazeera fact checking as your primary, and then look at the others as far as the more salacious stuff. Because Al Jazeera, again, I apologize for the cough. Al Jazeera is very neutral when it comes to this kind of stuff. They have opinion pieces, don't get me wrong, just like every news organization has their own opinion pieces. It's just that they also are very good and very quick about and they delineate very red-lined, what is their opinion piece and what is their fact piece, and their fact checking is very nonpartisan and everything else. Now, I'm going to hit a couple of the things. First off, Vance said that Iran launched this attack, which happened day before the debate, on Israel, when they received $100 billion in unfrozen assets, thanks to the Harris administration. That's not true. First off, that was That money was received when we did the Iran deal with Obama. They unfroze $100 billion. Also, there was a release agreement with Iran, with the Biden-Harris to release $6 billion of frozen assets, but they never got that because of what they did shortly after we got our hostages. They didn't get their money, so that was something that was talked about. Walz then talked about how Iran, launched missiles that followed near U.S. troops, causing traumatic brain injuries, and Donald Trump just wrote it off as headaches. This is true, as far as that's concerned. Now, Walz did, and again, this was not true. Walz said that Project 2025 is going to have a registry for pregnancies. That's not true. It would not be something to that effect. It recommends it, but it's not something that would happen. Now, Vance also mentioned the fact that there was 320,000 children that that disappeared. That's not true. The oversight, they referred to 32,000 children that failed to appear at their court hearings, but the others did appear. Blah blah blah, things of that nature. But there are other things. Now, one of the big gotcha moments, and I think it was just Walz stumbling a bit, was when they talked about him going to Tiananmen Square and was there for that particular moment. He was not there for that moment, but he was there during the summer when all of those, and probably spoke to students and people that were still doing stuff even after that particular moment. And everything else. So he got confused and he got the dates wrong and everything else. And he was like, yeah, I made a mistake. That was wrong. I was not there. So, he corrected himself as far as that's concerned. As far as, there was the abortion. I feel the talk about abortion and everything went really well for Walz at that point. I think the second half after the commercial break is when Walz, he probably had a little bit of a pep talk with his team. He went to probably went to the bathroom. Had a sip of water. It's like, all right, take a breath. You're doing fine. And everything else. And in a lot of ways, I'm kind of glad that Walz didn't try to be mean, because that's not in Walz' nature. I'm glad he didn't attack J.D. Vance as the person. He attacked the substance of Walz, of Trump and Vance's beliefs, but he didn't attack them on a personal level, and I think that is extremely important. J.D. Vance, again, didn't do that as well. Which I think is also important to at least pretend civility. Of course, Trump then, ate everybody's, then went completely nuts and started doing it, on his failed social website, Truth Social. But it's still one of those situations where it would have, I think, been detrimental to Walz. I mean, he went up another 23 points as far as favorability was concerned after the debate, as far as the flash poll was concerned. So I think that was I think it was very wise for them not to do a personal attacks and everything and go after the debate and stuff like that. I think the immigration discussion was good. Yes, I did enjoy the fact that that J.D. Vance started whining about the fact that, oh my gosh, you guys aren't supposed to fact check, and it's like, look, here's the deal, you have caused stochastic terrorism. I can't say the word terrorism on the people of Springfield, and you keep bringing it up. You keep causing more and more problems, and I think that is very detrimental for the people of Ohio, especially considering that both the governor and the governor of Ohio and the mayor of Springfield are both Republicans, both at one time. I don't know if they still do. I wouldn't at this point. I just wouldn't vote for president at this point. I'd be like, you know what? I'm still a Republican. I'll vote for a down ticket Republican, but I ain't, no. that would be the least thing that they could do. The best thing they could do is just vote for Harris and Walz, because the pain that they have caused in Springfield. And I know we keep bringing it up, but they keep bringing it up, and it keeps being a problem. And it scares me of what they're doing as far as this community, and what they're unleashing this kind of racism and this kind of hate, and allowing the individuals who initially brought this up to go ahead and just give them a platform. Is like, see, the leading the presidential candidate of one of the two major parties in this nation is agreeing with us that this is wrong and needs to stop. Giving them that ability to be that openly racist and everything else is problematic, to say the least. Not only that, but it's also just, it's gross in all sense of respect and everything else, because as me and September have discussed before on this show, it is a very old trope. I know when I was younger, I made the Chinese jokes about the cats, and to this day I feel bad about it, because I have grown as a human being and realized that was racist bullshit and I shouldn't have done it. But it is an old trope, and it's been an old trope for hundreds of years, thousands of years. They've talked about how this, it's like works in as far as religious cultures in the past and everything else. If they're not eating the correct diet and everything, how that causes shunning and everything else, and it just goes on. In India, they do the same thing. There was someone talking about how in certain parts of India it's very Muslim, and in certain parts of India it's very Hindu. And Hindu, you don't eat cows are extremely sacred, and in Muslim communities they don't eat pork or shellfish. They very strict to the as far as the Jewish foods and everything else. And so you would have the Hindus saying, I smell beef in your area, or I smell pork in your area, kind of thing. So so this goes on constantly and everything else. So saying that they're eating cats, or they're killing gooses, or killing the ducks, or whatever other bullshit that they're doing, when they're not doing that. The guy there was they even talked to. I know, and I'll get off this topic in a second. But they talked to a gentleman who was running a plant and everything, and was very happy about his Haitian employees. And now they've gotten so many threats that they're even threatening his 14-year-old daughter. Kind of situation. It is, that bad that he has had to purchase a gun to protect his daughter, and he believes in the Second Amendment, but he's never, he doesn't have any handguns in the house. He may have a hunting rifle or whatever, but I don't even think he has any guns in the house until this moment, where him and his family go to the shooting range to practice shooting, because they're afraid for their lives because of what J.D. Vance first, and then Donald Trump second, and then amplified it that way, and now everybody on the right wing, it's like, oh yeah, that has to be happening and stuff like that, and it's not, and it's gross, and it's disgusting, and it's just one of those things that you just go, whatever. Vance talked about how Harris was the border czar. That was never a thing. She was never a border czar. That was what the right wing deemed her, because basically. So, Harris's role was to go not to the border and deal with that. It was to go to the countries that were feeding into the immigration issue, and trying to find out what was the problems, why was this happening, and trying to come up with solutions so that there'd be less immigration, less people seeking asylum, if we could fix the problems down that were initially causing it. And so that was her job, was to go down to South America, to the different countries, and find out why these individuals were fleeing their countries, seeking asylum, what was going on, what was causing this conflict. And so that was her job. And the fact that they talked about this again, and it is true. that we had a very comprehensive, I felt a little too restrictive, but very comprehensive immigration bill that Donald Trump called people and was like, "Don't vote for this. Kill it because it will hurt my election chances." And the Republicans capitulated, said, "Sure, why not?" Because they care more about having power than they care about actually solving the problems. The last Republican president to do anything about immigration was Ronald Reagan. This was done in the 80s when he did the mass amnesty for the individuals. And that's a problem for that situation as far as that's concerned. There needs to be a more comprehensive, and we've discussed this, needs to be more comprehensive immigration way to get to become a citizen or to become a full resident here. I personally also think that they should be doing. Hillary Clinton talked about this, and I thought this was a good idea. That a lot of the people, especially the males, come up here, work 6 months, 9 months, and then come back home and go back home. And we should be able to work out a kind of a work visa program for farming and everything else to where it is perfectly okay for them to cross the border and work wherever they're needed as far as that's concerned. And that way, because they are then legally here in the United States as workers, they then get legal protections to where they're not exploited. And that's something else. And we also need to where these companies who hire illegal immigrants pay them under the table and everything when they are found out, instead of just, because these people are just doing a job that they're hired to do to send money back to, or whatever. Instead of punishing the workers, they need to punish the companies. And I ain't not talking about a slap on the wrist fine. I'm talking about heavy fines. I'm talking billions of dollars where it hurts you fines kind of situations. I think that is extremely important to help with the immigration situation. I think I think they talked about how there's more jobs due to especially with the climate jobs because of the CHIP Act, because of the Infrastructure Act, where they're building more of these things in the United States, where solar panels, where most of the United States solar panels come from the United States. Now, as far as the rest, now you can get Chinese solar panels, the cheaper solar panels, but as far as what is being used, especially for power companies and everything else, it's made in the United States. You can get them on your house and everything else for that kind of situation, and they're mainly made in the United States. And they're extremely useful for that, and they create new jobs, and they have. And then we have the CHIPS Act, which is reshoring our chip manufacturing, so how the chip manufacturing works is my understanding is that the chip manufacturing basically is that the chips are made in separate parts and then shipped to China where they put them together, because that's easy job to do, and then that's shipped back to wherever it needs to go. Whereas we're going to manufacture and assemble the chips here in the United States, and they've been reshoring those kind of jobs. There's been more manufactured jobs created under Biden than has been created since the 1970s. So that is a good thing to have happen as far as that's concerned. More climate jobs have also been created at this point as well. The executive orders, that works fine, but as far as immigration is concerned, I'm just kind of scrolling through the fact checks and everything else to kind of refresh my memory a bit. But again, the bill would have been much better as far as that's concerned and everything else. Vance claimed that he never supported an abortion ban. He has supported a national abortion ban multiple times. He's mentioned this in the fact and everything else. He's also mentioned that basically at-will divorces are a thing that is problematic and everything else. Even if even if the marriage could be considered violent, maybe we should figure out a way to how to fix that, and so that they can stay together. Hey, here's how you fix that: you put the guy in jail, and you let the woman, get some counseling so that she's a healthy person again. Whatever. So as far as that's concerned, and as far as everything else is concerned, when they continued to talk about abortion, they talked about the born alive situation and everything else. And again, this goes to the fact that because September had mentioned this to me when we were messaging each other during the debate, that she wishes she could have discussed or wished he could have went into detail about the law. And it's like, well, I get that, but it's a law, and he's not a lawyer. It's one of those things where sometimes you don't have that in your head. But basically what it does is, it's not a born alive, that what it is, when there are third trimester abortions, which are less than 1% of all abortions in the United States, those individuals have already painted the nursery, already bought cribs and everything else. They want to have this child. The reasons that these abortions happen is because there's a complication, or the baby is not going to survive once it is born. That it doesn't have a brain, its lungs are outside of its body. I'm going into gross details, but there's 1,001 things that the baby is not going to survive, especially once that umbilical cord is cut. And how the change of the law is care. What that means is that what are we going to do once the baby is born? Are we going to try to resuscitate? Are we going to try to keep it alive? Or are we going to help it pass easily? Kind of situation. Because the baby's going to die no matter what. There is 0.000 chance that this child is going to make it once it is out of the womb. So at that point, there's this discussion of how to deal with that situation, and that's where the care comes in. They're not killing the baby once the baby is born. If it is a healthy baby, they're not doing anything with the baby but cutting the umbilical cord and handing it to the mother. I don't even know if they spank the bottom or pinch the bottom or whatever to make it cry. I don't know that anymore. It's I've not had children myself. This is where September would be helpful, but unfortunately she's not able to join us. But it's one of those situations where, as someone who is not a parent, or have not been in a birthing room and won't be in a birthing room, I don't know what that part is. But what I can say is, as far as what the care part, when the law change in Minnesota is about how to best deal with this horrible situation. This baby is not going to survive. What do you want us to do at this point to either make it easier for the transition, or do you want us to keep it going as long as possible? Until we can prove it, whatever the case may be. That's where this discussion comes in. So, to say that they're killing babies as soon as they're born, healthy children, that is a bold-faced lie, and it's disgusting, and I hate it. So I'm going to end with the discussion that sort of kind of ended the debate, which was discussing the January 6th and the peaceful transfer of power, and how J.D. Vance is like, people, what was the exact words? Let me think if I can remember the quote exactly. It was, it's rich that the Democrats failed to understand that on January 20th, that there was a peaceful transfer of power when Joe Biden took office. I have a question for J.D. Vance. Does his calendar not have the 6th of January on it anywhere? I asked this question because, and I'm not the only one who's asked this question, because I, and September definitely remember January 6th, 2021. We went live on that show, for a show, talking about, because we had to talk through that, because we were watching it live. It was a failed insurrection but it was an attempt at an insurrection that failed because, as Hal Sparks liked to say, the insurrection was ran by idiots. So at least, at least we have some comfort in the fact that stupid people were trying to do it. Who knows what would happen if they tried again with people who were actually competent? But let's not go down that lane. But there is so much about that. I mean, to say that there was a peaceful transfer of power when just a week and a half before there was people storming the Capitol, 2 people died at the Capitol. One was shot, one was trampled by Trump supporters, who herself was a Trump supporter. 4 police officers took their lives because of the events of that day. Hundreds, like 149 police officers were injured in one way or another. Some have permanent PTSD is permanent, but have, permanent injuries and have mental scarring for the rest of their lives because of what happened on January 6, 2021. How dare you say that it was a peaceful transfer of power? And then to come back and say, when Walz is like, ask the question of, did Joe Biden win the election? And then J.D. Vance looked at the camera and was like, I'm not worried about that. I'm focused on the future. And that is and that's why I put that quote in at the beginning. That is a damning non-answer. Because basically they're saying that they know that it is still up to debate in Trump's mind. So, with that being said, let's talk about next week's show. Next week's show, or this week's show, because this is a week, several days late. Next week's show, I'm shuffling a bit because of the fact that the 166-page report from Jack Smith came out this week, and everything else. So we will be discussing the threat of a democracy that former President Trump and his ilk have a threat against us, as far as that's concerned. So we'll be discussing that and going into more detail about that. I plan on sometime before we record on Wednesday to basically rewatch our episode, mine and September's episode of the special Heresy and Hearsay episode about the insurrection. And then, discuss what threats we have as far as not just Project 2025, but his also Agenda 47, which we've already discussed, what they want to do as far as that's kind of changing and everything else. So, those are things that we'll definitely be discussing as far as that's concerned on the next week's show. Now, let's go ahead and do our carrot and stick. With our carrot, normally, and I apologize for the drops. I don't have all the drops myself, so I do apologize for not, putting What's Up, Doc. So let me do this now. What's up, Doc? All right. So the carrot, and normally I don't do Schadenfreude here. I try not to as far as the carrot is concerned. I want to genuinely give praise to someone for doing good. Even if they're a Republican, if they're, someone that, is in the political or religious world that is doing a good thing and I feel needs to be, have a little light shined on it. But last week, this just made me laugh because fuck this guy. Alex Jones of Infowars, all of his intellectual property, all of the equipment, the desk, probably the mounds and mounds of paper because he prints out paper instead of just reading it off of a tablet or whatever for his news articles. All the supplements, quote unquote, that he sells, all of that is going to be up for auction on November 13th. And it include trademarks, copyrighted materials, social media accounts and website are all going to be sold off. Well, why? Well, you see, Alex Jones owes over $1 billion to the Sandy Hook families who sued him because of all the pain and suffering that he caused them by claiming that that Sandy Hook was a red flag, that Sandy Hook didn't actually happen, blah blah blah, all this kind of stuff, and it's gross. It's just absolutely gross what he did as far as that's concerned. His followers some of his followers went up there and pissed on the kids' graves because they didn't believe that the kids were actually there. One guy was caught trying to dig up a grave to prove that a child wasn't there. These parents had to have closed coffins because the AR-15 basically eradicated these children. These children were between 5 and 7 years old. Tiny little children, riddled with bullets that ripped them to shreds. And this asshole was claiming that it was all just to take away their guns. It is not to take away their guns. This was a tragedy that, was caused because this individual had access to a gun that could do that kind of damage, that people shouldn't have, as Stephen King said in his short essay, Guns, shouldn't have weapons of mass destruction. If you can't shoot somebody with 6 shots or 8 shots, maybe you should go to the fucking range if you're looking for home protection. You don't need, a clip of 30 or a clip of 60, and these extended clips and everything else. So, fuck Alex Jones, and I hope he has to live in a 2-bedroom apartment in Austin, Texas, and hear all the liberals down in Austin cheering his demise, because fuck him. I'm glad that he's losing everything because he deserves it. What he did to those families, what he did to people, and made people believe this crap to the point where it ruined their lives as well. You have to take some responsibility for yourself if you claim to be an adult, but still, fuck him. And I'm glad that this is being sold off. And like I said, normally I don't like to do carrots like this, but this is one of those exceptions because he is just a horrible human being. Now, let's talk about Stick. Don't you blaspheme in here. Don't you blaspheme in here. Again, sorry, I don't have the clip. So, as you know, especially the mountains of North Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia, and Kentucky, but especially I hear mostly, and that's maybe because of bias of me being in the state of North Carolina, there's a lot of rescue operations still going on. They're still trying to find people. That, entire towns are no longer on the bloody map whatsoever. They're just gone, kind of situation. I mean, they exist on a map if you look at a map, but if you go there, there's nothing there but mud. There's parts of I-40 that won't be open for months, because it's just gone. There's nothing left, kind of situation. And FEMA and everybody else is doing the best they can. I know Harris and them are offering $750 instantaneously. You just say, hey, I need some money. And they'll give you a debit card, or they'll put the money in your bank account or wherever for $750, so you can go and get food and water or a place to stay, whatever the case may be. No questions asked, just bang. And people are like, well, they're only giving $750. No, fucktard. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have used the word that. I shouldn't have. No, idiot. They're not just giving $750. This is an immediate fix for the problem while they're trying to do everything else. And they're talking about how FEMA doesn't have enough money. Well, that's because the Republicans refuse to give them more money for FEMA until now, especially, and all the misinformation, how FEMA is blocking off places so that people can't get to it. No, FEMA doesn't have that capability. They don't set up blockades. That would be the National Guard, if anything. And the National Guard is busy with helicopters trying to find people. They aren't trying to blockade people. The only people they're probably trying to stop from going in is idiots and provocateurs and all that kind of stuff that just cause more harm. But what they're trying to do is make sure that there is a flow of people going through that can assist and help other people. So there's that misinformation. There's MTG saying that they can control the weather and they made it harder because these are red areas. It's like, first off, Asheville is a beacon. While everything else around Asheville may be ruby red, Asheville itself is sapphire blue. It is one of the bluest cities in this state as far as all the states, all the cities in North Carolina. Asheville is like, it's a hippie it's a hippie city, all right, and it's full of blue. So why would the Democrats wipe out a Democratic stronghold? They wouldn't wipe out a Republican stronghold because we're not assholes. This may be something that the Republicans would do, but it's not something we would do. So it's gross. It is gross beyond measure, all of the disinformation that's going on right now. And it needs to fucking stop. Just stop it. Please. Please stop. If you see disinformation, do not post it on your Facebook or Twitter. Because all it does is clog up the algorithm with more of this stuff. And then the people who need help or the people that are trying to offer help can't get it to you. So it is absolutely bullshit, and fucking stop it. That's all I have to say about that. So our call to action is helping with the hurricane relief. You can donate to the Red Cross, hurricane relief, Helene. I would also make a suggestion that you donate to the World Kitchen. They've been up there providing foods and everything else, and I have been a big supporter of them as far as, they are very good as far as getting to places that need food. They've been to Ukraine thousands of times. They've been to Gaza thousands, a lot, and they've even in Gaza they've even lost workers. They were killed by a stray quote unquote attack. By Israel because they thought they were terrorists, which, what the fuck, they were delivering food. But anyways, the World Kitchen, very good organization. If there's another organization, and make sure that, because there's a lot of scams going on right now up there as well. So, make sure that that's one of the things as far as this misinformation is that misinformation about how to get help is going out there. So if you can, post good places to donate, make sure that you do your research. There are websites that check these organizations and make sure how legitimate they are. So if you can donate, definitely the Red Cross or the World Kitchen. Red Cross is www.redcross.org, and for World Kitchen is www.wck.org. So those are two places you can go and definitely check them out. All right. With that being said, I want to thank you for joining me at Heresy and Hearsay. I'm Reverend Barney, and you can follow me on all the socials at Seth Roth II. You can also find the show on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and any podcast catcher. Just Google us. You can follow my partner, who is normally here with me, September, also known as Ninof12. You can follow her at her website at ninof12.com. That's NINEOF12.com. Where you can connect with all her content as well. You please go to our Patreon page at patreon.com/Heresy and Hearsay, where $2 a month keeps the show going. And I want to thank you for listening, and bless your hearts.